This is the most excited I have been the entire year. I came in 2 days ago to speak to my producer Natasha about this particular show, and she said for the first time on CNBC Africa, on Mansfield's Money Sense, you are allowed to use the F word. So I'm going to use it tonight. Franchising. That's what we're going to be talking about this evening. I know you dirty thing. You know exactly what you were thinking. Eh? We welcome into the studio Thabiso Ramasike, who is the head of franchising at Standard Bank, Bendeta Gordon, the director and founder of Franchize Directions, and Derek Smith, who's the chairman-elect of the Franchising Association of South Africa. He's also the MD of Hot Dog Cafe. I've got to come to you straight away. Hot Dog Cafe.
Yes.
Where do you guys come up with these concepts, you franchisee things?
It was, funnily enough, the original guy that started the concept found a cart in New York. He was visiting New York. He loved the concept. He brought the cart across here, and he started the whole brand from that one hot dog cart.
Have you always been in this business?
No. I only started about 13 years ago. Prior to that, I was in a completely different industry.
What made you go into franchising?
I actually sold my previous business, and I had a 2-year restraint. So 1 year I took a sabbatical. The second year I got bored and decided to do something completely different, which was retail.
You see, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people, and Bendeta, you may be able to give us some guidance here, a lot of people have done what Derek's have taken the Derek route, where they've gone from something totally different into franchising. But I would imagine a lot of people have burnt their fingers there as well, because they don't quite understand the industry.
I think you need to compare that to an independent business when you talk about burning fingers, because when you start off without the support of a franchisor and developing your own kind of intellectual property, the failure rate is far higher, although we don't have exact stats in South Africa. But going into franchising is far less risky and far more secure, but it's not without business risk. So we probably see a failure rate over a 5-year period of about 12% of franchisees, which is relatively low.
Does that make you guys feel more comfortable as bankers, Thabiso? Do you feel more comfortable working with somebody in the franchise business, as opposed to what Bendeta was talking about, the sort of independent, for want of another word?
Yeah. Jeremy, I think we've got to take a step back and say, what is franchising? I mean, essentially, it's a relationship between two parties, franchisor on one hand and the franchisee on the other hand. Right. And in there, there is a service or perhaps goods that are being offered for a fee, which is paid at a particular time. And in there, what are we talking about from a franchising perspective? We're saying there is certain standards that are predictable, that are inherent within a particular system. There is a strong track record. There is a pool of outlets that operate within a particular brand in that regard. So, from a banking point of view, it is very, very easy to start looking at it and say, if it is a good brand and there is a good jockey behind, or the good franchisee that is buying into that brand, it is easy for us to come in and support that. Yeah.
I suppose the one thing we should clarify here, and I think it's almost a bit of it's become attached to the word franchise. Everyone, when we talk about franchises, thinks of fast food. But there are a massive range of franchises that are available to people in the country. And I think there's something, I was reading some research, there are about 30,000 people who are involved directly in or as franchisees.
Yeah, well, could I just elaborate a little bit? Although it's Bendeta's forum.
No, you two can fight it out between the two of you. It's a family show.
It goes across 17 different industries, I think, within South Africa. Bendeta's survey has shown that. And it employs nearly 500,000 people in the country as employees. There's about 28,000, I lost that figure, there's 20-odd thousand outlets, and it contributes 256 billion to the economy.
Well, that amazed me, and I wasn't aware that this was your research. It's a fascinating document because it contributes more than agriculture sectors like agriculture and sectors like manufacturing. It's 11.8% of South Africa's GDP. That is astounding.
Of course it is. And I think when you talk about the 17 business categories, there are two particular large ones within that. That's the petroleum retail industry, as well as retail. So in retail, you've got fast-moving consumer goods, the Pick and Pays of the world, and they traditionally have very high turnovers. And the petroleum industry also does. In fact, petroleum companies cannot own their own sites. By legislation, they have to have a franchisee, or many of them call them dealers, operating their sites. So when you say the business categories, they are vast. They go from education and training to automotive products and services, to personal delivery, personal services, so it's a very exciting field and way of expanding a business for a franchisor.
But I mean, I can understand why you guys are very interested in this, because as you were saying earlier, you have got a certain structure to it. There is a backup system that's involved through the franchise, and I didn't realize it's contributing that amount to the economy.
Yeah. I mean, Jeremy, it's about 11% of the country's GDP, so it's a huge slice. Yeah. And I mean, you spoke about the sectors as well. I mean, out of the 17, from a Standard Bank perspective, we actually look at that and we said there's actually about 6 core sectors, and certainly fast food is one of them. The retail, as Bendeta has indicated, is a massive one. The food retail, basically. The fuel retail sector, the automotive sector is still very strong, especially in this economic downturn. People are keeping cars a lot longer, and we're observing that. Telecommunication is quite massive. I mean, the cell phone companies in this country amongst the biggest in the world. And last but not least, we still see future in the restaurant space. It's a strong contributor, even in this economic downturn. But what is also interesting is that we're seeing different sectors working hand in glove. So you'll see a franchise brand which is operating in the fuel retail space that is in partnership with a food retailer, or in a partnership with a fast food player, and that particular trend as well actually cements the quality of that franchise brand and that particular model. And
now this has got you excited.
I wanted to add something there as well. Bendeta said there isn't any formal research, but the Small Enterprise Development Agency pointed out a couple of years ago that start-up standalone businesses, they've got a chance of 90% failure within the first 2 years. And if you compare that to Bendeta's research, where within franchising there's a 10% failure rate, you can see there's a significant difference in security of your investment, which goes back to the support from financiers and that type of nature.
But you're also seeing, to come back to one of the points that Thabiso was raising there, Bendeta, you're also seeing this bond starting to happen where, for example, you are getting Pick and Pay franchises linking to a BP forecourt.
Absolutely.
So already the links are being made within the industry.
Yeah. They took a very, very long time to make those links. I mean, we're talking, this is happening over, it's developed over an 8-year period.
Right.
In the oil industry, what happened it's a very controlling industry, and they wanted to run their convenience centres. They didn't really want to get involved with retailers, and some of them have done it very, very successfully, and others have struggled. And so over the ones that have seen greater opportunity with the retailers, it's all about intellectual property at the end of the day. And in essence, that's what franchising is. It's licensing intellectual property. So if you can augment that intellectual property and apply it to consumers who are today are savvier than they've ever been before, they've got more information than they've ever had before. Yeah. You're going to lead in your field, and so that's why we're seeing now the cementing of those relationships.
But I would imagine, and Thabiso, I know you wanted to make a point on that, but I want to put something to you as well. Sure. I would imagine that drawing these links is actually working in favour of everybody, because you've got the expertise from, and I'll use the same examples, the Pick and Pay, and you've got the expertise of the BP, and you could draw those together.
I mean, Jeremy, not only that, but what we've also seen in environments where those collaborations have been done and they've been done properly, from a fuel retailer perspective, all of a sudden that existing fuel retailer sees revenue numbers shooting between 30 and 35%. And you can see it is because of that collaboration taking place at that time. And just to take a step back, what was mentioned earlier around the failure rates and around franchising and maybe the level of success rate and why it's so high. The reality is you also have different types of franchisors out there in the market. So not all franchisors have a similar kind of profile. And the same can be said also about franchisees. I mean, you have a franchisee that owns one store, and you also have a group of franchisees that will own up to 100 stores. So even in that, depending on how you then, or on one hand, you have a good, solid franchisor, and on the other hand, you have a fantastic franchisee. That combo. So obviously, that sort of, as it goes sort of down the line, it does trickle down a little bit. But the best case scenario is where you've got an A-grade kind of franchisor, and then on one hand, on the other hand, with a top-rated franchisee, that also increases that particular model. Okay,
we've sort of whet the appetite here on everything. But what I'd like to get into in the second part of this show is who is your ideal franchisee? How do you seek out the right franchisor?
Sure.
How do you marry the parties? And how do you get into this business? Because I think a lot of people are probably looking at it going, hey, hang on, I've got a payout coming fairly soon. Maybe I should start looking at this on the side. And that's even a question. Is it something you can do on the side, or is this the livelihood you've got to go for? We'll start delving into those questions in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.